Good afternoon, good morning, Leo. Good afternoon, committee. Welcome to this internal defense of Leo, Ph.D. candidate Leo Gomez. We are present in this meeting. It's Leo, the candidate, and then we have the committee constituted by Susanna, Yassel, and Spiridos. The thesis title that Leo is about to present is Exploration, Exploitation, Reconciling Product Innovation and Supply Chain Performance in Consumer Packaged Goods Manufacturing. So the agenda for today is Leo will have 45 minutes for presenting his work. Then the committee can have some time for public remarks, 15 minutes, Q&A also by the committee, 20 minutes. I understand there are no other people present, right? So it's us, the committee and the candidate. So we can skip the step of Q&A of any public that would be present in this session. And after that, we will have some, we will have a closed session with only committee members and the PhD candidates. 5 minutes and 5 minutes for evaluation. Okay, so let's all turn off, except Leo, let's turn off our microphone. You've already done so. We will keep on our video so Leo can talk to our faces. We'll see some faces at the side of his presentation. And so Leo, the floor is yours. You'll have 45 minutes for your presentation. Good luck.
Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon. Dear committee, dear participants, let's begin with the presentation. So today I'm going to present my research on the exploration and exploitation, reconciling product innovation and supply chain performance in consumer goods manufacturing. Just a second, because this thing was not working. Okay, so I'm going to start with an overview of the motivation and the context. I'm going to give a brief overview of the methods and the data. Then I'm going to present the major aspects of each part of my research work. There is a literature review, then preliminary interviews, more qualitative parts. Then we move on to a more quantitative part on hypothesis testing, 2 chapters on that, and we finalize it with an action research project. In the end, we have a final discussion, discuss the major findings, the limitations and direction for future research, and also my next steps, my plans to what to do with this research. All right, so it all started with a company called Meatco. This is a fake name to protect their identity. They have their wide assortment manufacturer of meat products. So they make many different types of products, like chicken wings, hamburgers, stuffed meats, canned meats, spring rolls, etc. They have a very wide assortment of products. And their strategy is to be a premium brand. They focus on quality and freshness. They always serve fresh products. And so this means that they have to have a very high inventory turnover and delivery very quickly. They provide a very high service level. They ship next day to customers, and they have a wide assortment, and they can customize their products to their clients. And then with this strategy, they have been outgrowing the market. So the market of processed meat is growing by 12% a year, and they're growing by 19% a year consistently. But on the other hand, their margins are being eroded. And one thing is that this growth comes mostly from new products. So if we see from the company's growth in the past periods, the new products are growing by 45%, and old products are not growing that much. They're growing by 2% a year. So it's not growing that much. They're very, very innovative. Actually, they introduced more than 300 new products within a period of 2 years. That's one product every other day. And it represented actually in their country, represented 12% of new product introductions in the food industry in the entire country. But the thing is that things get messy. When you start to introduce a lot of products that way, you insert a lot of variability within the system. There is a lot of links. Things get messy, and you're gonna learn how it got messy. So then it leads to a trade-off. So to what extent should I keep innovating? They're growing because they're innovating. So should they keep innovating indefinitely, or should they stop sometime and take the advantage of what they already have and get more productive? So exploration and exploitation is the concept that deals with this trade-off. Exploration means innovation, search, go there and do new things. And exploitation, on the other hand, is more about efficiency. So one thing is that explorators go out there and look for new oranges. And exploitation is actually squeezing the oranges that you already have. So, okay, so this was our context. So what we did with that. So then our research question is, how can we reconcile product portfolio, exploration, exploitation, and supply chain performance in consumer goods manufacturing? So to do that, we had a multi-method approach. We started with a literature review, trying to understand the evolution of exploration exploitation literature and linking it to new product introductions and operations management. We gathered a lot of data, and then we conducted preliminary interviews to understand how, actually, to understand the nuances on how new products introductions impact operations. And this led to testable hypotheses, which we tested using panel data econometrics. In the end, we used everything that we learned in this first part of the research to actually apply back to MIT-Go and see what a exploration and exploitation enabling supply chain strategy looks like. So we worked together with them and using the learnings, and actually developed a framework to dealing with exploration and exploitation from an operations management perspective. Then the data. Our data is both qualitative and quantitative. On the qualitative side, we had conducted many interviews within many different departments at MIT-Go: sales, customer service, infrastructure, the maintenance, production, etc. And also we had a very rich data, quantitative data, from the actual operations of the company over the period of 2 years. That is, we had client orders, production batches, lost sales, quality incidents, etc. And this data sometimes it's daily data, and sometimes it was more than daily. For example, inventory levels, we had it measured many points in time of the day, right? So then let's begin with our literature review. So we're gonna go now with each chapter. I'm gonna explain a little bit of the methodology and the main findings, right? So the exploration and exploitation conflict is multidisciplinary. So it started from the organizational learning perspective, But then it moved to strategy, attracted innovation scholars, operations management scholars, and etc. Many, many different types of research fields. And also they conducted different analysis in many different levels, at individual level, at the firm level, corporate level, sometimes cross-boundary. And it was so relevant and highly debated over the past 30 years that the Academy of Management Review gave a Decade Award, the 2013 Decade Award, to a paper in that field. Okay. And one thing is that one author, one important group of authors, Benzer and Tushman, the ones that received the prize, the award, they claim and they say that the concept reached conceptual maturity. So at a high level, the thing is, it needs more research at the operational level. It was discussed about the strategies and what should be done and how to do it from the organizational learning and strategy perspective, but it's very hard to implement and nobody actually knows how to get it done. So then is how operations management comes in. So as a field that deals with how to get things done, operations management is equipped with the tools to do it from the implementation side. So our work here was a systematic literature review. We got many different papers. We got some data from each paper related to exploration exploitation on the study types, contextual emphasis, central issues, level of analysis, etc. And relating the topic to new product introductions and operations management. So in total, we had 82 relevant exploration exploitation related papers, all published in top journals and over the course of 30 years. And one thing that we found is that there are three major solution streams to the exploration and exploitation conflict. One is structural ambidexterity. Structural ambidexterity is you get the organization and you want to explore and exploit at the same time. And it's called, when you do it at the same time at high levels, it is called ambidexterity. That comes from being able to write with both hands. Organizational ambidexterity is the ability to do things, conflicting things. So to do that, structural ambidexterity, you break down the organization into smaller pieces. So each one focusing either on exploration and exploitation. So you have it separated and then you can focus on what one to do. And then the top management is going to integrate the units. And then we have vacillation. Vacillation basically is alternating. It's not actually doing two things at the same time, but then it adds a temporal component. One time you do exploration, then it moves to exploitation, and then you go back and forth. And then there is also contextual ambidexterity, in that you look at individual. So the proponents of contextual ambidexterity, they say that actually ambidexterity is you have to do it at the same time at the single business unit. And the responsible for that is the person working at the firm. So you have to build an organizational context in which you allow people and you enable people to choose and to split their time between exploratory and exploitative activities. Another perspective of that is some scholars also consider whether or not ambidexterity is possible. They consider different views of the relationship between the two components of exploration exploitation. One is orthogonal, is that, okay, the two components, exploration exploitation, they are independent, and then they can be added up, and then ambidexterity is possible. On the other hand, there are the proponents that say, no, it's a zero-sum game. you cannot do both at very high levels at the same time. It's a continuum, and then you move along this continuum. And then there is the proponents of the layered approach. It's a more balanced approach, and that it depends on the level of analysis. If you're talking about the firm at the corporate level, no, then it is orthogonal, because then you have more resources, you have a big enterprise that you can divide in subunits, etc. But if you're talking about a business unit, a project, a plant, or a small business, which has a single business unit, then you don't have the resources. Then you're talking about a trade-off, the continuous. And from our perspective in this research, we are working with a small company. MIT-Co is a small company. And then we consider that from the operational perspective, for new product introductions in a small business, we can consider it along a continuum. So that's what the approach we adopted, okay? And then for new product introductions, let's think that if you introduce a new product, you're introducing innovation within the company. And the pace of innovation, the more products you introduce within the company, you are more explorative. If you are not introducing too many, you let the organization to adapt, you're mostly working with established product base, you are more on the side of exploitation. Okay, so it's not black and white. It's a line, you're moving towards exploitation or exploration. Okay. There is one thing here, some additional things here. One is that when you introduce new products, sometimes you increase assortment. If you don't have a proper product portfolio complexity management, you introduce a new product, if you do not retire another one, you increase your assortment. And Kripa says that if you have new product introduction and high assortment, it leads to higher costs, slower lead times, higher inventory levels. And also, we have to take into consideration the product level degree of newness, innovativeness. This must be taken into consideration. So, in summary, this is the relationship we propose for new product introductions on supply chain performance from the operations management side, from what we saw from the literature. The rate of new product introductions directly impacts supply chain performance and also indirectly impacts supply chain performance through the changes in production assortment. Okay? And then it is moderated by product level degree of innovativeness. We're gonna explore this, go deeper on this in the next chapters. We're gonna go see how this thing works, why this thing works, and then you're gonna test and measure it to see to what extent it actually happens. So, future research opportunities that we found from our literature review. One is, there's a call for addressing exploration, exploitation, implementation questions. There is a call for more longitudinal analysis. Most of the research that we see out there are cross-sectional. There's also a call for using operational primary data, because most of the studies out there are either based on surveys or are theoretical or use secondary data. And there's also a call for doing more research on using operational performance metrics, because most of the studies they are using financial performance or growth performance, etc. So our next steps here, and this led to a paper that we submitted to JOM. We got to reject and resubmit from them. We are now working to submit it again. And our next step, the next chapter, is actually investigating the relationship on new product introduction and supply chain performance. So then we go to our interviews, our qualitative part. So based on the results from the previous chapter, we wanted to see how new product introductions impact supply chain performance. And we followed some case study guidelines from Yin. We conducted an empirical qualitative investigation with MIT-Co and conducted 33 semi-structured interviews, as I mentioned before, in order to develop a set of testable hypotheses. So what we found was that there's evidence that new product introductions jeopardizes directly supply chain performance due to attention shifts and learning curves, mostly, and the indirect impact is due to assortment increase. So the direct impact, you shift attention from regular activities. For example, procurement. If you are we're talking about food, so if you introduce a new ingredient, the procurement department, they are used to buying some type of ingredients, and then they have to move to the new one, and they stop doing what they were doing before. So you actually compete for scarce resources, which is in line with what March said. And then there's also the learning curves, because you introduce process and product changes, and people have to learn how to do it. And they were mentioning that, hey, people here keep including new products, and then sometimes I come here to the factory and then I don't know what to do. So this is what happened. And then there's the indirect impact associated with having more SKUs to manage internally, which drives demanding uncertainty, drives manufacturing complexity, changeovers, etc. And it all is exacerbated by the moderating effect of the product level degree of innovativeness. Then this led to our model, which is based on an evolution of the previous one. So this is the relationship. We chose 3 different supply chain metrics, performance metrics: service level, inventory freshness, and product quality conformance, because it was based on the company that we were working with. These things were important to them. So this is our model that we're gonna test, okay? New product introductions directly impact service level, directly impact inventory freshness, product quality, and also indirectly impact through assortment increase, and it's moderated by innovativeness. So future research, hypothesis testing, and also conducting it with additional setting, because here we were working with only one company from one geography, but you should also try it to see whether or not it happens in different settings and different types of companies, larger companies, different countries, regions, for example. So this one, we want to publish in a more managerial-oriented journal. So from the 4 papers that we are planning to publish in this, from this thesis, this is going to be the last one. I'm going to talk about this in the end. Then let's go to our hypothesis testing. So first we have, we chose to do it in 2 steps. So one is non-moderated and the other one is moderated. I'm going to explain why, and I'm going to present it separately. So the first one, we tested a subset of our model. We didn't test the product level degree of innovativeness moderator, because there is one thing, we paid very close attention to threats to internal validity and the problem of indigeneity. And it happens that this variable is prone to measurement error. We still think it is important, the results are insightful. We didn't want to leave it out. The only thing is that we chose to have it separately. We have one strong part, which has no apparent threats to internal validity, and the other one, we reintroduce the variable and compare the results, okay? And here, our model, in the end, we included 3 different control factors. One is time-specific factors, because we are talking about seeing the company, seeing the data through time. So it's a panel data, right? So it is cross-sectional. We have 6 different categories, our level of analysis, product category, over the course of 105 weeks. Here we aggregated the data to a weekly basis to better capture the variations and nuances. If you look at one day only, it's not, sometimes it's not possible to see the impact of a new product introduction. So we chose a week. So the thing is, the company is evolving. The company is learning, and they're introducing continuous improvement all the time. So time must have it's an important component, because the company is evolving. So we measure, we control for everything that is time specific. And then we also control for everything that is entity specific. We have 6 entities, which is our 6 product categories. And there are some characteristics that are intrinsic for each product category. So we leave it out, we control for it. And also for production volume. We think that it might be a significant aspect here, so we chose to control for it. So we used hybrid fixed effects and random effects panel data modeling using Discro-Cray standard errors. So we have weekly data, as I mentioned before. We reported 2 different types of standard errors: clustered standard errors and Discro-Cray standard errors. I'm gonna talk about it right after. Our dependent variables were fill rate, inventory turns, and return rate, which each represent the service level, the product freshness, and the quality conformance. Our regressors were the number of SKUs introduced on each product category per week, and the amount of production assortment. Okay. And also tested for mediation using Barron and Kenny methods. So let's talk about the fixed effects, the hybrid fixed effects and random effects panel data model. So the traditional models in panel data is fixed effects and random effects. The thing is that they are not appropriate to everybody. You have to choose between that, then by conducting Haussmann tests, and then you see whether or not you choose each one. The thing is, there is a new method that you don't need to choose between fixed effects and random effects, which is the hybrid. And the hybrid also was recommended by Ketokivi and McIntosh when they on a paper published in JOM, that they talk about the problem of endogeneity. And this is one of the methods that they recommend. And also, there's another thing, and I forgot to mention. We analyze our hypothesis both in the short term and the long term. And this hybrid method allows us to capture different interpretations of short-term and long-term perspectives. Because one thing that it does, it's done basically that you get your data, your variable, and you break it down into 2 different variables. One variable is the difference, it's differential, what changes from the mean. And the other one is the mean of that variable, which is time invariant. So we can interpret it as the characteristic, the long-term characteristic of that product category. For example, if the product category has a higher average of new product introductions per week, it means that they are more innovative overall. On the other hand, if they're lower, they're less innovative overall. So then we are able to capture long-term. So short-term with the differential variables, and long-term on the the mean-centered. Another thing that we used in this research was Discrocray standard errors. And Discrocray standard errors basically is a method for standard errors when you have cross-sectional dependence. So in a pane of data, you have your entities and the time component. And if you are cross-sectionally dependent, the distribution of the variables, it happens a lot when you're talking about microeconometric models, which is our case. Then using the mainstream type of standard errors, the heteroscedastic robust cluster standard errors, it leads to biased inferences. So actually use this other one, Discrocray. It is usually larger standard errors, so it is more robust, but it has less power. So the things that sometimes we're gonna see that one thing is statistically significant using the mainstream, but then when we introduce the Discrocray, is no longer significant. It requires more significance, more power to be significant, right? So that's it. In the end, these are our main conclusions. So for the fill rate, we didn't find support for the direct and indirect impact. We found secondary findings that assortment changes impact fill rate, but that is not necessarily related to new product introductions. It's the assortment changes per se. We cannot claim here the mediation. Okay. In the inventory terms, we saw that for the long term, the most innovative product categories, they present lower inventory turnover in the long term. And this is partially mediated by the average assortment that you have in that product category. And we also found that secondary findings that the wider assortment categories, they have higher inventory turns. Then on the quality side, we saw that the more innovative product categories, also from the long term, they have more product returns. They have more quality issues, but there's no mediation with the assortment side. For the assortment, we saw that both for the short and the long term, it changes the assortment per se, but it is not necessarily related to new product introductions. Okay. So here I have some of the tables. So this, for example, one example of how it's different, the power of the mainstream heteroscedastic clustered standard error in the Discrocray. Here we have a table of 4 different regression models, and they're both, each one, they're side by side presented with heteroscedastic clustered standard errors in Discrocray. So for example, this model, its fill rate regressed on number of SKUs introduced. If you use the cluster standard errors, it is significant at the 5% level. But if you use the Discrocray, it is no longer significant. And we used the Discrocray standard errors for all of our conclusions, okay, which is the right one for this type of data. All the tests point to that. Okay. I'm gonna skip the other ones just for the sake of brevity, but then I can go back on the tables if you want to discuss it later on. Any question on that? So, managerial implications. Isolated new product introductions may not be that harmful. Just the isolated. Introduce a new product today. Okay, but the thing is that frequently introducing new products coupled with improper complexity management and product variety, portfolio complexity management, leads to poor operational performance. Because organizations need to adapt, time to adapt to changes. You introduce a new product today, the organization is going to adapt without with no harm. But if you introduce a new product every day or every other day, then things get messy. You don't allow the organization to adapt. Okay? So then companies, because of that, companies should rationalize their new product introduction strategies to see what's the time that they need to introduce new products and what is the proper product portfolio size that they need. So future research. So there's a lot of future research points on this. So we can analyze many contingent effects, for example, resource coordination and flexibility, firm size. We also can conduct this analysis with multiple companies and geographies. Here we are only focusing one company, although we have different product categories, but it would be nice to have it in different companies and geographies. More longitudinal studies. Here we address the call for longitudinal studies, but using longitudinal data. This is not actually a longitudinal study. So more proper longitudinal study to see if you introduce a product today, what's the impact tomorrow, 1 year after, 2 years later. Also, there is a moderation that we did not include here. And also certain aspects of supply chain strategy. These last two ones, we're going to talk right after. Okay. And we plan to submit this one together with the next one, the next chapter that I'm going to present, in the next 2 weeks. We're working on that. We have a working paper on that. So then the moderated hypothesis. Here we introduced back our product's level degree of innovativeness variable. Okay, so this was the idea. Mostly the methodology here is basically the same as in the previous chapter. The difference here is that we included the test for moderation. So there's an interaction term, new product introduction times in degree of innovativeness, and we introduced it into the model. And let's talk a little bit about this variable, the product level degree of innovation. We based our variable in a two-component variable. Okay? So product level degree of innovativeness means product innovation and process and technology innovation. And it all depends on the degree of newness of this new product. So if there's no substantial difference related to previous products within the company, or then it is not innovative. But then if it's new to the world, it is a very innovative product. So this is 1 to 5 scale. And there is also the process and technology, which follows the same idea. If it is no different to what you do currently in the company, it's not innovative. If it's very different, then it is a breakthrough. It's very innovative. Because of the measurement error, here we measure this variable by interviewing one person within the company. There was only one person within the company that was the head of R&D, was followed all of the introductions within the period, was the only person knowledgeable enough to measure it. So we realized a little bit on the subjectivity of this person. So that's why we think it's a little bit of measurement error. But to mitigate that, we adopted a dummy variable to avoid fine-grained subtle differences in degree of innovativeness. We just divided. If it is higher than 3, the score, then it's high. If it's lower than 3, it is low. So it's a binary variable. But before the binary variable was what we introduced into the model. But here I have the detail. It was actually the products introduced within the companies were not that innovative. If we see here, most of the products, 72% are here in the low level of degree of innovativeness. There's no breakthrough innovation. Sometimes they just change, they add some ingredient. They do hamburger, now hamburger with carrots. or with more salt, less salt, etc., lean or fatty. So it's subtle differences sometimes. So we found support for the moderation hypothesis in the long-term perspective in some cases, right? So for the fill rate specifically, we found that categories with more innovative products introduced are associated indeed with lower service level in the long term. Yet we didn't find support for the moderation hypothesis on the others variables, inventory turns or return rate. Most of the other results were similar to those in chapter 4. Only the secondary findings in the return rate that we found it like the long-term impact was no longer supported, only the short term. So the results is, again, as I said, it is something that we put it on the side, a different chapter for that. And I think it's worth deepening the analysis of the moderation effects on the product level degree of innovativeness with more data points. But this is going to be combined in the paper that we are going to submit within the next 2 weeks. So then we move to our final chapter, which is the mitigating role of supply chain strategy. We got all of the results from the previous, the learnings from the previous chapter, and conducted a series of workshops, interviews, and worked together with MIT-Co to find a way in which supply chain strategy can support new product introductions. So we saw that new product introductions impact performance. The performance of several areas are jeopardized, and companies should have a clear new product introduction strategy, etc. So we got this, and we used the conceptual system assessment and reformulation method, which is a method for supply chain strategizing created by Perez Franco, and we applied that at MIT-Co. So it has 3 components. First, it maps, we started with mapping the current supply chain strategy, and then we conduct a set of surveys to evaluate the supply chain strategy according to a set of criteria. And then we have a third method to reformulate and to improve the supply chain strategy. And our interest here was to identify the trade-offs, the major trade-offs related to exploration and exploitation, and see, in light of with the literature and what we learned, what can be done to enable, to craft the supply chain, exploration exploitation enabling supply chain strategy. So here is the MIT-Co supply chain strategy. So they want to frequently launch new products. They want also to mitigate the operational impact of innovativeness, but they want to provide high service level. They want to explore new markets, national, international. They want to sell very fresh products and produce superior quality items, but they also want to reduce the cost. So when we survey these participants within the company, we formed a committee within the company that was going to work on this. This was the most evident evaluation, that the most evident conflicts, that these components, the components of the supply chain strategy, are competing against one another. So they want to mitigate the operational impact, which is not compatible with frequently launch new products, which is not compatible with high service level and cost reduction. So these are all fighting to one another. So one comment from them was, they don't want to have stock out. They have a no stock out policy. And the thing is that they overstock products, they overproduce. And then it impacts the cost of the company. So then we reformulated the supply chain strategy. Everything that is in red here is the things that changed. Everything that is in black is what maintains the status quo. Okay? So we wanted to make the minimum change in the company. In the end, we had to change a lot of things. But these were things that were proposed from them. We presented, we mapped the supply chain strategy, reviewed with them, they evaluated it, we presented the evaluation, that they finally came up with new concepts for their supply chain strategy. And in the end, it led to a set of actions that they can take. So one is define a segmentation plan for clients and operations. Define an assortment strategy. Do not introduce new products and not retire other ones. So periodically review, have a strategy for categories, category management. Improve the information flow, the integration of the quality of information. This is one thing that can leverage this innovation, because, for example, you're introducing a new product, sometimes the factory, they just receive a new product and they don't know what to do. For the forecasting people to do production planning and procurement planning, sometimes they don't have enough information from the people from R&D. So improve the information flow is important. Also, systematize the new product introduction process. Define processes and quarterly planning model to plan ahead which number of new product introductions they already want to introduce. Define a better inventory policy and do more planning, basically. Okay, so our final discussion. Our overall conclusion for the thesis. We found that new product introductions are associated with lower supply chain performance, especially in the long-term perspective, and when the company does not have an assortment complexity management in place. This impact is exacerbated by sustained higher product level degree of innovativeness in the case of service level, and reconciling product portfolio exploration and exploitation requires improving segmentation, assortment rationalization, new product introduction planning, and improving the information flow. So this research contributes to the literature as we analyzed and summarized the evolution of exploration and exploitation. We evaluated the impact on how new product introductions impact supply chain performance. We also tested and measured this impact, both in short term and long term. We tested the moderation effects of product level degree of innovativeness. We added a different level of analysis, product categories, to dealing with new product introductions, which is a new thing, especially in operations management. We employed the XAR method as a research method for the first time. And we've unveiled a set of supply chain trade-offs that can be faced when a company wants to be both innovative and efficient. To practitioners, we also provided some contributions. So some managerial implications that we provided a summary of the relevant literature, which can be helpful to those dealing with exploration and exploitation. They don't need to read it all, just read the summary. We improved the understanding about how new product introductions impact performance. We quantified the impact of new product introduction in the supply chain, which can be a helpful decision-making tool. And improved managerial intuition for conditional supply chain implications of innovativeness. And we also provided guidance to building exploration, exploitation, balancing supply chain strategy. So it's there's no lack of limitation. It has limitations. We chose some theoretical lenses of exploration, exploitation. There's a ton of other theoretical lenses, frameworks, and concepts that can add up to this topic. For example, absorptive capacity, dynamic capabilities, resource-based view, etc. We we mentioned attention shifts in learning curves as the components, as the reason for the direct impact on new products introductions on supply chain performance, but we have not included it explicitly in our model. So this could be interesting for further testing, especially in this case, we could use structural equation modeling for that. And also we have operational data from a single firm. So this led to interesting for future research ideas. So we can use these different points of view that I mentioned or other ones. We can introduce attention shifts in learning curves as potential mediators in the path from new product introduction to performance. Can conduct more research using product category because it allows capturing exploration and exploitation variance as one category may behave different from one another. And also test it with different settings, industries, and geographies. So from this, we want to publish 4 papers. This is our publication plan. So the first one, it's working towards it to submit it within the next 2 weeks, is a quantitative paper based on chapter 2 and chapter 4. We want to target high on this. We want to target JOM. The literature review based on chapter 2 was already submitted to JOM. It was received a reject and resubmit. We're working on this. We already improved it, just final shaping to resubmit it to JOM, and maybe if it doesn't work to IJPE, I think it would be interesting. The actual research paper based on chapter 6 that targets is an IJPE, mainly because the original concept of the SAR method, the conceptual assessment, and reformulation, it was originally published in IJPE. So I think it would be an interesting follow-up on this one. And then the case study paper, which is more targets to a managerial audience. So thank you very much. This was the presentation of my thesis. Questions?
Okay. Thank you, Leo, for your clear presentation. So we will have now time for public remarks by committee members. Just reminding, it's Spiridon, Gültekin, Jassel, and myself who are the committee members. So we'll have 15 minutes for general comments. After that, we will have room for Q&A by the committee, and then Q&A by the other people that are present in this meeting. Okay, so I would like to give the word first to other committee members because I've been very intensively involved in the final stages of the project. So other committee members, Spiridon, Gültekin, Jassel, do you want to comment on the thesis?
Yeah, Spiro, if you want, you can start.
Okay, so Leo, congratulations. First of all, I enjoyed very, very much reading your thesis. It's very rich in terms of various methodologies that you are using. You have a very exhaustive, I would say, literature review. I enjoyed the case study, very well presented. This links well to the quantitative study, and I was also impressed of the strategy development part, which actually of how much the initial strategy of the company changed after the exercise that you facilitate. So as a side comment as well, I would like to double congratulate you for your commitment and determination, because I know that all these years here were tough for you, particularly since you became a father and you had to balance the family life with a PhD, which really is a very tough project, and I double congratulate you for this. I have some comments that will follow with the Q&A.
Thank you, Spiridon. Gültekin?
Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. It was a very nice prepared. I think it's a well summarized work. And you know, I read your thesis. It was a very long thesis, and it's a really tough job to be able to summarize and cover all the important points in a very brief period of time, and you've done a great job in that regard. Thank you. In general, it was a very educative for me. You provided a great deal of important and relevant references in your thesis. So I think that was also a good part of it for me. And I think that's it from my side. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gültekin. Yasser?
Yes, Leo, many thanks for this very efficient and profound presentation. I do believe that this officially for the very first attempt was very clear. The message, the background information concerning the problem. I also believe that to cover all the corners of this, imagine that cover all the corners of this performance indicators or this performance Latin variable, which is supply chain performance, by the way, is not a trivial issue. I think from the theoretical perspective, all the research, all the papers you had revised, this is very solid. This is very solid work. Not only because of the quality of the cited papers and the information to collect or to gather all the independent elements of the models, also because the problem you are addressing and the construct you are addressing, and also the confrontation of these two experiments, including and excluding the mediators elements. Okay, so from my side, I'm very content about the way you presented this broad level of information and I would say reduced amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yasser. And then finally, some comments by myself. I think that this thesis it's a really good example of a candidate being able to balance relevance and rigor. In academic research, it's all about finding the balance. You research the balance between exploration and exploitation. As a researcher, you have to find a balance between relevance and rigor. This is a real-world problem. You've helped a company with a real problem, a supply chain problem, and you've applied rigorously several methods. So this balance, it's really appreciated in the thesis. In terms also of research challenge, you have a good model. It's an interesting model. There are antecedents, there are outcomes. You have a mediator, you have a moderator. The methods applied, it's really well done. The work is coherently developed. So my congratulations in that regard. Also, you demonstrate in the thesis that you're capable of developing multi-methods, quantitative, qualitative, the interviewing technique, the action research technique. So in that regard, it's a rich work to read. The thick book, it's interesting. I'm looking forward to the shorter papers to be published, which require a very different writing style and much more to the point. And then finally, on a personal note, I've enjoyed working with you, the different iterations that we have had. You take it up really well. You get comments, and then you have a very good way to deal with the comments and provide your response to those comments. So in that regard, it has been a pleasure to work with you. Okay. So we can now proceed to the Q&A by committee members, and maybe we can follow the same sequence. Spiridan, you want to start?
So Leo, you have a very nice counterintuitive result over there, which has to do with inventory turns. So we have in the long run, when you introduce new products, then due to the increase in the complexity, you have a negative impact on inventory turns. While over there in the short term, you find a positive impact. Your explanation of this is that possibly this is due to potential stockouts. So I have first a question and then an alternative suggestion. So the question is there any particular reason why you chose to use sales instead of COGS for the calculation of inventory turns? For the ones who are not aware, COGS means cost of goods sold. So it's a cost element, because inventory in the denominator is measured in cost, while sales includes as well the margin. So this is the question, Leo, to you.
Actually, the sales here was the amount, not the financial metric. It was the number of inventory sold, the number of materials sold. So in the end, it is the same using COGS or sales here, because we're talking about material, not financial.
So it is volume, let's say, kilos, let's say, or units of measurement. Okay, then I don't have the alternative explanation, because I will just say, for the sake of completing my argument, is that sometimes, you know, when you introduce a new product, then you have an extra margin over there, okay, which could potentially justify in the short term the increase in the inventory turns in the short term, but not in the long term, because then it's the other effect that dominates. You know, the complexity effect will dominate. So I'm done. This would be my only comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Spiridon. Gültekin, you want to follow?
Sure. Actually, I had a question related to that when I first saw that, because it's about sales, right? But you also mentioned returns, and I think this is perishable products, so you will also have some perishability. So how do you think perishability impacts your measurements in terms of you know, inventory turns? Because you tie it to freshness. So I think somehow, if you just look at that data, it seems somehow censored. It may be some missing, you know, maybe some production capacity that you used, but you did not turn it into sales. So how would that impact your model or your analysis? That was one question that I had in mind when I first saw your formula for freshness, especially.
Could you repeat the question, please? It was a little bit hard to follow. That it was a little bit.
No, it's just my question is, you know, this is, you know, your inventory turns calculation relates to freshness, right?
Yes.
Freshness, right?
Yes.
And freshness. So we're talking about a perishable product, right? So now, if the product, you know, just basically reached its shelf life, so you need to dispose it, right? So you don't see that disposal. Maybe, I'm not sure, maybe you see it, but it seems like to me somehow that disposal, because of, you know, reaching the shelf life, is it fully captured in your metrics? Or if it's not, you know, how do you expect that dimension, or that additional consideration, to impact your analysis? That was one question that I had when I was, you know, reading the thesis, and I think it's related to Spiros' question, because you're also measuring your inventory turns in terms of, you know, sales, the products that you sell, but there are products that you don't sell, right? And that, you know, the products that you don't sell, they also use production capacity and supply chain. So that was my question.
Okay. So one thing is, let me first explain how they work, which is related to this. They make to order, basically. So one day at up to 5 a.m. the day before, they receive the orders. No, actually, the day before, on midnight, they plan the production. On the next day, in the morning, before the production starts, they actually receive the orders. So they're at the same time, they're merging a little bit of make to order with some forecasting. Mm-hmm. So that is their strategy, to have very fresh products. They ship it actually they ship sometimes same day. They receive the order in the morning and they ship in the same day. And so the products are very fresh. And it requires a very, very flexible capacity and very responsive supply chain, right? One thing that we did not consider the shelf life over there. There is one thing that it was interesting we thought about researching that, but we had to choose what to do, is that they were using a sort of pricing model tied to the shelf life. So for example, you have a product that has a shelf life of 15 days. So I can deliver you a product with a 10-day shelf life. This is one price. If it's a 5-day shelf life, it's another price. They have it somehow, but it's not, it should be more scientific. It can be more structured.
Okay.
It will be a revenue management problem.
Yeah. So it's also they don't they make to order basically. So that's okay. I understand. Okay. All right. And one more question. So you use the term impact a lot. So I think that implies kind of causality, and how confident are you in your analysis that this is really a true causality or versus as opposed to a correlation, because you've used the word impact a lot. So I'm not really working in this field. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but when you say impact, that sounds to me at least there is some causality, right? But we know that there's this question or dilemma about at least whether something is correlated or is caused by something else. So what did you say about that dimension of your analysis?
Okay. I'm very confident about the causality because first, the way we structured the problem, we started with the literature. So the theory, the causality path first follows the theory, follows the literature out there. And then it was the first empirical, the qualitative part also corroborated to that. So we had one model of hypothesis to be tested, corroborated both by theory and qualitative data. Then on the analysis, we followed all the steps to avoid any threats to internal validity. We controlled for time-specific factors. We controlled for entity-specific factors. We controlled for production volume. And we developed a very robust method. We followed a very robust method, on which makes me very confident that it actually, we were very overly rigorous, maybe, because the type of standard errors that we used requires so great impact to be significant, to imply significance, that we put the bar high, right? We put the bar high and follow all the steps. So I'm confident on that.
Okay. Well, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wiltekin. Yassel?
Okay, Leo, so I got a couple of question concerns, and somehow they are related with, it might be the second comment, second remark about it. The very first one is about a kind of group comparison. So if I'm not mistaken, what I saw was that you tried to compare the effect or the impact, let's proper say it, on the research, on the supply chain performance, including moderating effects or moderating latent variables and excluding them. So is there any comment about that on the managerial implications? I saw a couple of tables there where somehow you analyze how significant is the impact on supply chain performance, but I was still looking at the what was the true effect if we included if we excluded on that. Probably you got more outcomes in your document, in your thesis document, one of the good things here is of this event is also to give you some recommendations for the second presentation as you see it. So as you said, so correct me if I'm wrong, but in some cases, including the mediator variable doesn't change anything, right? But in some cases not. Am I correct?
Let me take a look here. Let me go back to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Let's.
Yeah, the previous one, I guess. That one.
Just one example. So here, on models 1 and 2, we have without moderators.
Mm-hmm.
We're just directly analyzing the direct impact. Mm-hmm. And where we include the mediator, the assortment variable, and put them together, it changes the number, it changes the coefficient.
The p-value, yeah.
Yeah, but doesn't change the interpretation.
Okay, that's good.
Not significant before and not significant after. So only if we considered the more, let's say, the more mainstream heteroscedastic cluster standard errors, that this variable would be significant. But it would be significant not alone, but controlled by assortment. And we cannot claim mediation on that, because one of the requirements is that it needs to be directly significant without the control. So here, let's suppose if we were relaxed the heteroscedastic, the standard error, we were not so rigorous on that, we could claim here that there are two direct impacts, independent. They're not, there's no mediation. But here, when we say the one that we use the right method, the right standard errors, it doesn't change the interpretation. On this one, let's take a look at the other one. In this one, it changes. In this one, it changes. Let's say here here we have one that is significant at the 5% level. The other one is very significant. It's not significant. It's 10% level. We cannot consider anything here. But let's suppose that if we considered it to be significant, then we would be fully mediated by assortment, because it is all the conditions are met.
Yeah. Yeah, Desiree, one question. We could also say now some comments about the presentation, or we let it for the very end?
Shall we leave that for the very end?
Oh no! What I'm asking you, if I forgot the protocol, but do we now use the time for question, and we also mention some subjections in case we have it, or we let it for the next round?
We will have a closed session with the committee only, yeah, and then with the candidates. So we can leave that for the end.
Okay, very good, because I got some comments. How could this table could be enhanced? Because at first I somehow guessed some of the information, because I had certain experience on this kind of models, but it's sometimes hard if somebody is try to access that. But okay, I got the point, Leo. My second question is about the trade-off, which is tremendously important in your research. So you were constantly supporting your idea that we have here we have an experiment, a kind of observing the same experimental unit through a series of observation over time, right? Over different time horizons, right? Am I correct? It's a kind of longitudinal analysis. So is there any contribution beyond the managerial implications you had present about how to manage the right balance of exploitation over time? If does any of these models contribute on that? Is any of these model outcomes derived after processing all these wonderful data that you got could provide any managerial insight about the time, saying it is time within this time period it's better to has less innovation and exploring better the one we had made, something like that. In case not, you would be totally honest to say that.
Okay, got it. One thing, we use longitudinal data, but this is not exactly a longitudinal analysis, because we do two things. One is from the two components of the hybrid method, the hybrid panel data method. One side, we see what is the impact. We're talking about weekly data. So if you introduce more products on a week, what is the impact on the supply chain performance within that very week?
Okay.
So we're not talking about what is the impact within 1 year, 2 years. No, it's within that very week. It's contemporaneous, right? The thing is that we control for organizational learning, that's the time-specific effects, because we're using panel data, so we can control for it. So it doesn't matter if the company is improving or not. All of these things are controlled for and put aside. And we are talking about what is the period effect of the new product introductions. And then on the other hand, we look at the average, which is the closest that we get to be more longitudinal. We see that on average, if you introduce more products, what happens? It's not exactly longitudinal. We can consider that actually as kind of intrinsic characteristic of a behavior, characteristic of behavior of a certain product category. So if you have the characteristic of more innovative, what happens? Okay. But then there's no,
I got the point. That's excellent explanation. Yeah.
But thinking about how to manage it, that's a $1 million question. It's actually, it's one thing to be more to go deeper. It's one thing.
Yeah, because what I'm saying is, I would like to probably. I think you got very good raw material here for do something like that in the future. Like that would be an excellent paper. I have checked that some of yours wonderful papers, journals you got gathered was management science, for instance. And checking about this topic just within your presentation, there are excellent proposals about how to operationalize that. And one of the main contributions you have is certainly a few papers I have checked is that this kind of trade-off had been addressed theoretically, and some that you present very nice here is that how the elements, the input elements you got in your model impact this trade-off as well, right? But I got the point about because at first I was somehow confused about the longitudinal, and then you got a very direct way to explain it in an effective way. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you.
Okay. I have thank you, Yasser. I have a final question. So in chapter 5, your mediation analysis, you control for entity-specific facets. So these are characteristics of the categories, the product categories. And innovativeness, it's one characteristic, right? Without naming them. So in general, we know that different entities, categories will have different characteristics, and therefore they will have some they will express some variance due to these specific characteristics. That's chapter 5. Then in chapter 6, you add moderation analysis, and you pick up, you take out one specific category characteristic, which is innovativeness. So could you say that you're double checking for innovativeness because you're doing it already through your procedure, the procedure of chapter 4, and in chapter 5, in addition, you define it as you pick it out and you put extra light on it and you study it through moderation analysis. How do you see this?
I don't think I got the point.
So in chapter 4, right, you control for entity-specific facets.
Yes.
Do you consider that innovativeness is an entity-specific characteristic?
Yes, maybe, because we have different product categories. One are more innovative than the other one. One is more, for example, in the specific case, we can have the product line of hamburgers. Hamburgers is very automatized. You put on the production line and you make the hamburger. And you just have to mix different ingredients, have like different setups, but it's almost all the same. On the other hand, we have the lasagnas. Lasagna is very different. Lasagna is widely manual. Actually, to lay up the lasagna, it is manual. So it's a different thing. And then, so the degree of innovation and the flexibility that you have in both, and the degree of innovation, of innovativeness that you're allowed to be in both are different. So this is one example. And this may capture some of the aspects of innovativeness. And maybe it's a double check. I didn't consider that in the analysis, in the thesis. I didn't look at it that way, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it may just be interesting also for further steps, because if these entity-specific facets are so important, so give them a name and for further moderation checks, because moderation, it's also kind of controlling for. So in that sense, in chapter 5, you may be double controlling for this kind of innovativeness. And I was just wondering about the effect of that, and if there are potential other category characteristics that are worthwhile to pick out. As you say, the ease of setting up the production line from one to the other products, for example, complexity of the bill of material, for example. So that may be something to further reflect upon for future research.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so far the Q&A from the committee. We have now time for the public. So other people in the public, I've seen that many people have arrived. Do you have questions?
Chagri is asking. Chagri is asking, Desiree.
Okay. Okay. Chagri, please go ahead.
Congratulations, Leo. Very nice presentation. I've got, I think, 2 simple technical questions and 1 comment maybe. So in the control factors, did you have like the utilization, for example? Because in the literature you mentioned scarce resources, and maybe over time if you see the level of utilization, 80%, 50%, that may have an effect, right? Did you look at that?
No, unfortunately not. We wanted to have it, but their factory, the data for the factory for it was very inconsistent. We cannot use it, but it would be nice to bring.
Okay. The other one, I don't know much about it, so it's more out of curiosity. So when you had the degree of innovativeness, and then you had the 1 to 5 scale, and you said if it's from within the firm, from outside, blah, blah. And then you said, since it was just one person, it's subjective, you converted into a binary variable, I think. So I don't know, to me, it sounded a bit like something that I wouldn't do, but as I said, I'm not familiar with this particular research. So if you have only one, like information from one person, and then you even take out the details from a 1 to 5, go to a 0, 1, then you lose information that is already very limited. So, I mean, does the theory say that that kind of transformation is really good when you have a very low sample size?
Okay, one thing.
If you have, I don't know, answers from 50 people and then you can make the conversion, maybe it's okay because you can end up in a situation where everything is 0, right?
One thing is that we can use one person. It's acceptable, but it relies on the subjectivity of that person. There was a person over there that must decide whether the product innovativeness is number 1 or 2. Sometimes there are subtle differences, and you can either put 1 or 2. But one thing that you know, and this person was very knowledgeable about all of the products, was the head of R&D. And so one thing that we trusted was, okay, if we take out some details, this person can remember either the product is innovative or not. It's like more pronounced. But the fine-grained level is much more, it's much harder.
Sounds wrong here. Can you hear Leo?
Yes.
Okay, can you hear guys? Because I couldn't hear him.
I could. I was hearing well.
So one thing is, so there's subtle differences. So we decided to, okay, let's put the more blatant perception over there, and then we can, this will lower a little bit, assuage the measurement error. So that was the idea.
Did you try with the other version as well? Just to try?
I'm sorry?
Just to try, and I mean, test the model. Did you try it with the 1 to 5 and 0, 1 and compare the results?
Yes, right.
Are they similar?
It didn't work.
You didn't?
It didn't work because for the perception, it is not continuous. Sometimes, for example, I found results that a product number 2 had a lower impact than a product number 1. So, there is something weird. And this weird thing is just because there is this fine-grained sort of differences. So that's why we decided to separate it. And another explanation for not having found any much significance in the results when we added the moderation is that when you see the product's level degree of innovativeness of the company, for example, when we take a look here, let's go back here. It's a very low level of product level degree of innovativeness. So they're just sometimes changing some ingredients.
No files.
Yeah. So in the end, you don't have much variability to be able to capture this impact. So this is one thing that for future.
That's why it's more okay. Good. And one more comment. I don't want to take too much time. I already took, I think, but so usually this new product introductions and assortments, like a wider assortment, is pushed by the marketing departments. That's my understanding. That they would like to make the consumers happy, providing them a lot more options, let's say, new products. So did you talk to the marketing people in the company, and did they, let's say, force you or recommend that you should have the profits as an indicator for supply chain performance rather than the cost, so that sales being an explicit dependent variable?
Sales
because they may say, well, the performance in terms of cost is going down, but if you're really going, are ahead of the competition by introducing a lot of new products, then you're making more money, so it compensates for the loss, for the reduction, I mean, for the increase in costs.
So
I don't know, maybe I missed something.
This is one thing that I haven't researched about, but it's in my mind all the time. But here I had to choose the operational perspective. I didn't look to the competitiveness perspective. But in the end, what would be interesting to do is let's do the actual trade-off. Let's see the balance between sales and profit and operations to see what actually is more profitable, to which level of innovativeness, if level of exploration, exploitation is more profitable. But then we have to look at both sides. We have to do a multidisciplinary research using both the marketing perspective, sales, etc., strategy, and on the other hand, also the operations. But no, I haven't looked at that just because of focus on the focus of the research.
I just thought of it because you showed the graph of markets, like the company growing at a higher rate compared to the market. So I thought maybe they're doing well.
This part I just pointed that, okay, the company is growing, but then I moved to the operation side.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Very nice presentation. Good luck.
I see another hand by AF. I don't know what the full name is.
Hi, Leo. This is Rex. How are you doing?
Hello.
Congratulations. Congratulations on your presentation. I thought it was, very informative. Although I'm not an academic like the panel, I from a business perspective, I seem to get a lot from it. But my question is related to the last commenter, somewhat in that. What would you recommend? I know that the specific industry was for meat production, meat company, but what would you recommend for people in other industries who are trying to balance the innovation and the exploitation aspects? So I guess in other words, what would you tell people in other industries to help them gauge whether or not they're successful enough in their own attempts at SKU diversification or cost control? I hope that made sense.
Yes, it makes sense. This research is applicable to this type of company. It can be seen from a broader perspective for consumer packaged goods. Those mostly those who sell to supermarkets. Who has perishable products, etc. But I think that some ideas can be taken to other industries. For example, having a well-established new product introduction plan I think it's an important thing for any type of industry. For example, this company specific, sometimes they were just introducing new products without previous planning. Afterwards, after the new strategy, they started having a plan for each quarter of how many products they would introduce. But I think it is nice to have in any type of company this plan structure. Then the category management. I think it's managing the assortment that you have is important to any kind of company, and improves operations in any kind of company. But there are some nuances. The size of the impact may be different. For example, in perishable products, you cannot have a high inventory of finished products because it's perishable. If you are manufacturing a different type of product, you can just keep it high in inventory. You're going to have a high inventory cost, but then the service, you can guarantee a high service, for example, if you can maintain a high inventory. So the impact is different. The way it impacts in different industries may be different, but I think the recommendations are mostly applicable to any type of. You just cannot use the same metrics, the same levels of impact, because it will be different.
Of course not. Thank you and parabéns.
Thank you.
Edson, he has raised his hand.
Thank you, Desiree. So, guys, as a former Z-logger, I'm glad to see so many familiar faces here. 2 points to you, Leo. First of all, congratulations. I think it was a great presentation. Alan, Benjamin, and I, we know how much effort you put on that. And the second point is, it's really impressive the way that you actually use academy to create and generate impact in the real world. I think my questions here goes more. Have you got a perspective, a more recent perspective, of course, disregarding the crisis scenario, of the impacts that your thesis actually created on MITCO regarding inventory or costs?
After you mean after the changes?
Yes. Yes.
I haven't yet. I cannot see that everybody that is participating here, but I actually invited some of the MITCO's people to the presentation. And one thing that I mentioned yesterday with one person from there is that I would like to follow up and to see what is the impact and conduct a follow-up research to see what happened after the changes. But I don't have the information yet.
Great. That would be great. I think it will actually give us even more weight for your thesis. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we proceed to the next step in the agenda, which is a closed session between committee members and the PhD candidates. So thank you all for being present in this presentation. Leo, if you want to say goodbye, up to you.